Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another segment. Today I have Shawn Bustin from Farm Lending Canada. Shawn, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Tracy. Thanks. How are you?
Good. I am so happy to have you here, continuing a conversation that we've been having over the last couple weeks and months about alternative agriculture financing. So I'm excited about this conversation. I know you guys are at Farm Lending Canada. So why don't we dive right in? Can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are, your background, and your role with Farm Lending Canada?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And we truly appreciate the opportunity to come here and really talk about a story and how we're positioned to help support Canadian agriculture. So, born and raised on a small farm in southwestern Ontario, agriculture has always been a passion of mine. And to be honest and to be frank, I've worked real hard throughout my career to find ways to stay connected to agriculture, both in what I'd call my day job and help support my farming habit at night. So my background has been predominantly focused on agricultural finance in both the banking world and credit union space. And then about 6 or 7 years, well, longer than that ago, 10 years ago, we started talking, some of my partners that now form Farm Lending Canada started talking about this idea, can we get together and form an alternative lending organization focused on agriculture and supporting Canadian agricultural producers? And that's what now has become Farm Lending Canada. So we started formally about 6 years ago. And my role, day-to-day role, is focused on the credit side of things. So I'm officially the chief credit officer, but really focused on solutions and managing the portfolio of borrowing clients that we service across the country.
I love it. I'm sure you guys in the audience heard me say this in the last segment, but I think it bears repeating. Agriculture is such a capital heavy business. So many variables and things can happen, right, Shawn? So to me, when I was trying to find episodes for the Impact Farming Show to deliver people ideas, impact for farmers, I'm like, how is it that there's nobody else? If the banker says no for XYZ, then it's no. That doesn't make sense. And then when I got talking with you guys, I'm like, okay, perfect. Let's chat. So I am equally passionate about this conversation. So I think this is a great point. If individuals have caught the other ones, they might be familiar. But can you talk about the Canadian agriculture lending market? Give us a little bit of a view, 30,000 foot view of Canadian agriculture finance. I think that'd be handy.
Perfect. Yeah, no, love to. And that's a great place to start. Internally, and we think about and segment the market really into three buckets. So the first bucket would be conventional, traditional financing, that you would expect to, and you do, that the banks, credit unions, and Farm Credit Canada does a great job of providing across the country. So that's the one segment of the market. The second segment would be alternative or bridge type financing solutions, and that's the segment that we've identified as our niche, and that's the part of the market that we focus our energy and time and focus on that specific piece of the market. And then there's the other end of the curve that would be pure equity type solutions. So someone that has the equity, but not necessarily the income or frankly the financial resources to repay the debt. And that's the pure equity side of the equation. And that's the part of the segment. That's a small part of the Canadian market, but it's a part of the market that we don't participate in. So we're really focused in the middle. We're focused in on those solutions where there's an exit strategy and there's the ability to help provide some capital in the short term and help bridge them to a different lender or different financial partner down the road. And that's the segment of the market that we focus on. And that's our area of expertise.
Okay, you've touched on it already, but I want to dig into it deeper and really dissect what that means. So, when and why would a farmer come and see you guys? Would that be the best way to ask that question?
That's a great way to ask it. And it's as diverse the way I like to position and answer those type of questions is it's as diverse as the customers that we're dealing with. And what I mean by that is there's a whole range of situations. It could be timing. It could be the neighbor next door and those of us that are active in agriculture know how this works. It can happen over a weekend. The neighbor can come over and has determined it's time to sell the farm and they really want an answer today. And if you're interested, and if you don't say yes, they're going to go to the next neighbor right after talking to you. So those kind of scenarios where there's a need for a quick answer, and there's times where we can be quicker in the alternative space than some of the conventional lenders to get to that yes, provide the capital in the short term to get the transaction closed. And then with time, on their side, the producer and the farmer can find alternative lending, conventional lending to ultimately pay us out. So that's a scenario. Um, there's other scenarios where some bad things have happened. There could be multiple years of drought or flooding or both,
Yeah.
right? And we've certainly seen that across the country. And the bankers that these producers are dealing with tend to be very passionate and committed people as well, but they have parameters they have to follow. And if it's been 3 or 4 years of challenging financial results, they may be looking for someone else to take over that relationship. And that's where we can get involved. Our participation in those situations is more temporary, and we work with the producers to restructure their operation, restructure their balance sheet, and really set themselves up for future success. And in the best case scenario, pivot them back to the conventional lending institution as short a time frame as possible. It could be succession, situations where there's a grandchild that's coming along that doesn't maybe have the financial, you know, assets to purchase the farm traditionally. They may not have the experience. They may not have a combination of both things where there's maybe a creative approach that can be taken, and maybe there's some equity, some sweat equity, and some debt that can be used. So there's a lot of different situations that can really lead themselves to working with alternative or bridge lenders. And
Mm,
that's a few examples that I've shared.
that's fantastic. Thank you. So then I think the next logical question goes hand in hand, but maybe you might want to dive into it a little bit deeper. The types of loans. Do you want to expand on that more?
Yeah, sure. No, I'd love to. So our business is focused on asset-backed farmland, real estate-backed mortgage loans. So we're not involved today, at least, in true operating facilities. The use of our capital can be used for input financing and those type of uses, but the security itself would be the real estate assets of the farm operation. The use of capital, again, can be very diverse. It can be anything from working capital, new equipment purchases. They may want to upgrade and put some more storage in place to store their grain and market their grain at a more favorable time of the year. So those are all things that, would be typically used for our capital, but ultimately the structure would be a mortgage loan supported by the equity that the producer has in their farm assets, so farm real estate assets.
Just when my cows are finally worth something. You don't
They're
want them.
worth they're worth an awful lot right now, and it's great to see. Honestly,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
it's uh, it's time that particularly the cow calf sector has enjoyed some favorable pricing for an extended period of time.
I agree, Shawn. I was just bugging you. Okay, so land backed mortgage loans. Okay, that makes sense. So, why don't we speak about your lending area, if you're right across Canada, and different sectors? Is there things that we want to talk about within that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great kind of question to dive into. You know, from a 40,000 foot level, we're really focused on food production. So it needs to be an operation that's involved directly or directly into food production and any kind of auxiliary type industry. So it could be a processing plant or some other kind of value add, um, derivative of food production. So that's our focus. From a geographic perspective, we're spread across Canada, as you've alluded to. Most of our business, which would be which would make sense, is dominated between Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. We go further west, we go further east, but that's kind of the breadbasket, I would say, of Canada. So we're focused on those four provinces predominantly. And from a sector perspective, it's quite varied. Our biggest concentration, and again, it makes sense just based on the market in Canada, would be grains and oil seeds is our biggest sector that we support, followed by beef production. So again, two of the largest commodity groups kind of combined in the country is predominantly where we see our business. That geographic diversification does shift over time, and it's really more weather related and commodity price related. So in other words, there's times where there's more capital required in Western Canada because of weather conditions, for example, and it could be commodity pricing or expenses that drive capital back east. So there's some ebbs and flows in our portfolio, but we do we really want to be there and ready to serve the market when there's a need, a capital need, and those capital needs are diverse.
Okay, I love it. So I want to boil it down to a single idea to summarize it and then come back up and then get you to expand again. So if you were talking to a farmer to clarify what you do, what is the primary challenge, problem that you guys are solving? So then that's boiling it right down to that elevator pitch, what you do, and then bringing it back up to the bigger picture and looking at alternative egg market, the whole market, and who else is in there so people can get an understanding of your mission and your placement, I guess we could say.
Yeah, okay. And you may have to bring me back to the questions, but I'll take a stab at it and dive in. At its core, I mean, what we do is provide access to capital. So that's a simplified kind of starting point of what we do. Um, but to take a step back and really think about and articulate what we do is we, and this goes into our underwriting process as well, but for us, it's relationship based, which all business is relationship based, and it's the story. And what I mean by the story is really getting an understanding, a true understanding of the operation and the individual that we're working with. So really digging in and getting an understanding of what the history has been, so kind of the narrative on the history, what is the current situation that they're facing, and it isn't necessarily all doom and gloom or bad. It's going to be a variety of things. There's going to be some good things and some bad things, and as importantly, or potentially more importantly, what are their aspirations for the future? So what, and I'm mixing a couple of different topics here, but really what we love to do is provide solutions. So we really we're here to provide capital. That's our I guess our the method that we provide the solution. But we need to understand what solution, what problem that we're solving, or what opportunity that we're providing the capital for, and making sure that we're creating win-win situations for the producer and the borrower. So we want to be partners in their success. And it's interesting about our business, our relationships can be relatively short term in nature. In other words, a lot of our borrowers are only with us for a year up to 3 years. And unlike a lot of lending relationships, success, and I know we'll probably talk about this later, but success is seeing those relationships flourish and in some cases move on from working with us directly.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah.
so I, I'm sure I missed some of the nature of your question, but that's
No,
that at the core is what we do.
that's really good because I know everybody in our audience, they know in agriculture, going to a bank, getting a loan. But what happens if the loan or the banker isn't quick enough, if the banker says no? It's great to hear you explain why you guys are there, what you do, the term, your real mission in the market, right?
And
So
what's
I think you,
interesting, if I
yeah,
could
yeah,
just jump in
please.
there too, because you just raised something that's really important, and I don't want to miss it, is we're collaborating with the banks, credit unions, and Farm Credit Canada. We're not competing with them. And as a lender that sat in those desks, one of the hardest things you can do is sit across from a producer and say, I really like you. I really believe in what you can do, but I can't help you today.
Right.
But if they can, if they have to deliver that message, which at times they do, but if they also can add to that and say, but there's some alternatives, we think that it's, that there's something worth exploring here. It doesn't quite fit yet today, but yet we see the potential to turning this into something that does fit for us. So here is an interim step you can take, and we're one of those steps. That's where we're positioned in the market. And, there's a few firms like us in Canada, not many, very few that are focused on this niche. And that's really important. And, and from a competitive perspective, I know I missed that part of the answer. Who else is in the space? And we really don't look at them as competitors. We're just, again, collaborators. This market was traditionally serviced by high net worth individuals in every small town across this country. So what would happen traditionally when they couldn't get financing, or the timing wasn't right, or whatever the challenge happened to be, the alternative lender or lenders were individuals in that community that would either use their own capital or pool their capital to help support these businesses and these operations. And again, tying in with one of the earlier questions, we saw this as an opportunity to provide, we'll call it organized capital, across the country to help fill that void. So to help support those new startups, those challenging situations, those successions, those, where there's a quick urgency or an urgency required to the capital, we can fill that void in the short term. And that's really what our mission is.
Okay. Excellent. That was great. Okay. Why don't we go to the farmer? They're listening, they're interested. How do they approach you? And do you want to talk about your lending approach? If somebody wants to have that conversation, let's start at the beginning and walk us through what that looks like with you guys.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So from a lending approach perspective, we do a very thorough deep dive into the situation, and I touched on this earlier, the story, and for us, the narrative is really, really important. From an experience perspective, what a producer could expect, they could expect providing all the type of information that they've been asked for many, many times, by any lending partner they've had. I'll argue and I'll suggest, maybe not argue, I'll suggest, but that's where the similarities end, and where the differences are. And what I mean by that is we typically will ask for their net worth statement, we'll ask for their production plans, we'll ask for, some projections, we'll ask for 2 or 3 years of historical financial results. And at times we get pushback on that, and people will say, well, why do you need all that information? And the answer is very, very simple: is if we don't understand the full scope of the situation, we can't provide the appropriate solution. And what we never want to do is help half solve a problem. We want to provide a complete holistic, solution. So we ask all these questions, we dig deep, and it's not to make the decision, but it's to understand the history, to create the present, to create the future. So it's about digging deep and asking those questions. And sometimes they're a little uncomfortable conversations, and they're not uncomfortable or not intended to be uncomfortable from a judgment perspective. It's purely from an understanding perspective. And the beauty of working with us and folks like us, we've all been there as producers. I'm a producer. I know you're a producer. We understand the challenges that they face. We're very, we can relate to the challenges that they're facing. And by gathering that information, we again, I know I touched on this already, but we can provide the appropriate kind of outcome. And and I use these words a lot, and I probably more than I should, but we're really focused on the qualitative aspects of the borrower, not only the quantitative. And what I mean by quantitative is just the numbers. Anybody can crunch the numbers. Anybody can really add back and determine what the cash flow's been. But the qualitative side of it is saying, okay, I understand the numbers, but what else is different about this operation or about this individual, and what are the key success factors that they bring? And if we change these numbers and change this structure, match it with that personality and that objective, the outcome can be really, really powerful. So um, at the onset, and kind of getting back to our process and our structure, it may look like and it may feel like, they want all this numbers and they're, really focused on the numbers. The numbers are undeniably important, but it's only part of the picture. It's the people, it's the qualitative side of things, the character of the borrower, their aspirations, and all those things are critically important and um, form the whole package.
Okay, excellent. That was a great explanation. So, if a farmer comes to you, you mentioned the words short term before. So, when they're coming to you, what does success look like when a farmer approaches you? And where does that go from the yes to the you're our customer to what's next?
Yeah, from a timing perspective, in short term, it's a bit of a relative term. For us, when we say short term, it can be a matter of literally weeks and months
Oh, right.
to anywhere up to, 3, potentially even 5 years in duration. As we evolve and as we mature as a company, we have aspirations to be providing additional products and services that will extend that length of time with us. But I just really, I guess I'm speaking and focusing on current state. So success for us is really the success of the producer in achieving their goals, and ultimately in today's market, leaving us at some point and transitioning to a conventional lender, whether it's a bank, credit union, or Farm Credit Canada, as their financial um, partner on a long-term basis.
Lovely. Shawn, this has been great. As I started this conversation, I am passionate about the work you guys are doing. You match our mission here at Farm Marketer, the Impact Farming Show, to bring farmers the people and ideas that'll impact their operation. And as we know in agriculture, what is more critical than financing? It's such a key piece of our operation. And I love that you guys are coming in and providing solutions for Canadian producers. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And again, we sincerely appreciate the opportunity to share our story and help Canadian agriculture in our own little way.
I love it. And if producers want to learn more, what is the best way? Should they call, email, visit the website?
I would start with the website. The website is full of information, all our contact information. And yeah, love to talk. I would talk farm every day, all day. So love to hear from anybody with any questions or feedback.
Perfect. And for you guys in the audience, I will put all those links on the show page. So head over to Farm Marketer, check out the episode, scroll to the bottom, and you can find all those details. So thank you, Shawn, so much for spending time sharing your wisdom for the work you guys do at Farm Lending Canada. Really appreciated.
Likewise. Thank you, Tracy.
You are so welcome. You guys in the audience, if you like this episode as much as I did, like it, share it, get it out there because other farmers need this information. Thank you, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.